Jenna was in a good mood that day. The sun was shining and the mall was buzzing with people. She and her best friend, Lisa, had spent the afternoon shopping for clothes and trying on the latest trends. The store was full of people, but they were both in their own world, chatting and laughing. Jenna had always been the kind of person who liked to make the best of every situation, and today was no different. She was having fun, enjoying the little things, like trying on ridiculous hats and laughing at how silly they looked together. As they walked down the mall corridor, Jenna's eyes caught something that made her smile even wider. There, standing at the entrance of the mall, was a mall security guard. Jenna wasn't afraid of him at all. After all, he wasn't a real police officer, just someone who worked at the mall to keep things in order. His uniform was neat and his badge shined in the sunlight. He had a serious expression on his face, standing tall and looking around as if he was keeping watch for anything suspicious. His eyes didn't seem to focus on anything in particular, but Jenna couldn't help but notice how serious he looked. He looked like someone who could easily be a character in a crime movie. That's when it hit her. Jenna was known for her playful sense of humor, and sometimes she loved pulling little pranks. Nothing big or mean, just harmless fun. Looking over at Lisa, who was busy looking through a store window, Jenna whispered, "I've got an idea. Let's mess with him." Lisa turned and raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? Mess with the guard?" she asked, sounding both intrigued and a little nervous. Jenna grinned. "Yeah, it'll be funny, trust me. Let's pretend I'm stealing something and see how he reacts. We'll just make it obvious it's a joke afterward. It'll be hilarious." Lisa hesitated for a moment, but then she rolled her eyes and chuckled. "Oh no, this is going to be a disaster, but okay, I'm in." Jenna felt a rush of excitement. She wasn't planning to actually steal anything, of course. That wasn't her style. But pretending to sneak something into her bag? Now that would be fun. She glanced at the guard again. He was standing completely still, looking around like he was scanning for anything out of the ordinary. Jenna couldn't resist the challenge. Taking a deep breath, she began to act. She took a small trinket from a nearby store, just a little decorative keychain. She quickly hid it inside her bag, making sure no one could see. Her heart raced a little as she glanced over at Lisa, who was watching her with a curious expression. Jenna took a few steps away from the store and then started to look around suspiciously, as though she had just stolen something. She turned her head quickly to see if the guard had noticed. At first, he didn't react at all. Jenna tried to act nervous, like she was worried about getting caught, glancing around every few seconds and clutching her bag tightly. Still, the guard didn't seem to notice. Jenna wasn't sure whether to be impressed by his focus or frustrated by how unbothered he seemed. "Come on," Jenna whispered to herself. "He's got to notice something's up by now." Lisa stood beside her, biting her lip, trying not to laugh. "Do you think he even saw you do it?" she asked. Jenna shook her head. "I'm not sure. I think he's busy, but maybe if I act a little more guilty, he'll come over." With that, Jenna started to make her movements more exaggerated, looking even more suspicious. She kept glancing back at the guard, acting like she was about to run off. She felt the thrill of the prank building, imagining how funny it would be when the guard finally realized she was just joking. But Officer Daniels wasn't reacting. He didn't seem to care that Jenna was pretending to steal. It was like he was in his own world, standing at his post with no attention on her at all. This was starting to feel like a challenge. Jenna knew she needed to step up her game. She made her next move. She started to walk slowly past him, taking exaggerated steps, pretending she was about to dash off with her bag. She looked back at Lisa, who was now covering her mouth, trying not to burst into laughter. Jenna was starting to feel a little ridiculous, but the whole situation was so absurd that she couldn't help herself. She gave Lisa a wink as she walked past the guard, this time intentionally bumping into him with her shoulder. The guard didn't move, not even an inch. That was when Jenna finally began to realize something wasn't right. Usually people would notice her and laugh along with her pranks. The security guard wasn't even giving her a second glance. He was too focused on his job, too serious about what he was doing. For a moment, Jenna hesitated. Maybe this wasn't such a great idea after all. But she was too far into it to back down now. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "I'll just do something a little more obvious. Then he has to come over." So with confidence, Jenna reached for her bag and started to fumble with it. She made the motion look clumsy and exaggerated, like she was trying to hide something she didn't want anyone to see. She paused to look over at the guard. This time, She expected him to step forward and say something like, "Excuse me, miss, I think you've forgotten something." But instead, he started walking toward her. At first, Jenna thought it was a coincidence. Maybe he was just walking past her, right? But no, he was coming directly toward her with a purposeful stride. Jenna's stomach flipped. Her playful smile faltered as the reality of the situation set in. This wasn't a joke anymore. The guard came right up to her and stood tall, not even cracking a smile. His face was serious, his posture rigid, like he was in full security mode. Jenna was stunned. For the first time, she felt a little nervous, but she tried to brush it off with a light laugh. "Hey, what's going on?" "I'm just messing around," Jenna said, trying to keep things casual, but her voice wasn't as confident as before. The guard didn't laugh. He didn't smile. His eyes were focused, and his voice was calm but firm. "Miss, I'm going to need to see what's in your bag." Jenna blinked, taken aback. "What?" "Oh, come on, I'm just messing around," she said, still trying to make light of the situation. But Officer Daniels didn't budge. He didn't even react to her attempt at humor. He just stood there waiting for her to comply. Jenna's heart raced. She had underestimated this guard. What she thought would be a harmless prank had quickly turned into something that felt much more serious. Jenna's laughter quickly faded as the guard's words sank in. For a moment she stood there frozen, unsure of what to do next. This wasn't how she imagined things would go. She had thought that the guard would see the humor in her little prank, perhaps tell her off with a smile or even laugh along with her. But instead, the mall security guard was looking at her with a steady, serious gaze, and his tone had been calm yet firm. His words echoed in her head. "Miss, I'm going to need to see what's in your bag." Jenna felt a nervous knot twist in her stomach. The playful energy that had fueled her earlier was quickly draining away. She could feel her face getting warmer, a wave of embarrassment rushing over her. She had always been the kind of person who liked to joke around. But now, standing in front of this unamused security guard, she wasn't so sure of herself. Lisa, who had been standing just a few steps away, was watching the whole exchange with wide eyes. Jenna glanced over at her friend, who seemed equally taken aback. Lisa's mouth opened, but she didn't say anything. She just stood there, unsure whether to laugh or be concerned. It was clear from Lisa's expression that this situation was escalating in a way neither of them had anticipated. Jenna tried to shake off the nervousness. She wasn't a thief, and she wasn't planning on actually stealing anything. It was all just a joke, a harmless bit of fun. She thought the guard would realize that soon enough and let her off with a warning or a smile. But instead of backing down, Officer Daniels stood there unwavering. His arms crossed in front of him. "Miss," the guard said again, his voice steady, "I need to see the contents of your bag." Jenna hesitated, feeling a growing sense of panic. She had never expected this reaction. She'd been so sure that this was just a harmless prank, but now she was starting to feel the weight of the situation. What if this wasn't as simple as she had thought? What if there were real consequences to this? Wait, Jenna stammered, trying to diffuse the tension. "I was just joking around." "It's not what it looks like," she added, trying to laugh. But the sound of her own voice didn't sound as convincing as she'd hoped. But Officer Daniels didn't flinch. He didn't smile or nod to let her know he understood her intentions. Instead, he continued to look at her with the same calm, serious expression. "I don't have time for jokes, miss," he said. "If you're not hiding anything, then there's no problem. But I have to check." Jenna looked around. Feeling the heat of a dozen eyes from nearby shoppers, she realized they had started to gather around, and the situation was drawing more attention than she had ever planned on. A few people were watching, some with curious expressions, others whispering to each other. It felt as if the whole mall was suddenly focused on her and the security guard. She felt herself shrinking under their gaze. Her mind raced. What was the worst that could happen? Could she really be accused of stealing just for a silly prank? She had no intention of doing anything wrong. She just wanted to have a little fun. But this wasn't fun anymore. The way the guard stood there looking at her with those steady, unblinking eyes made her realize that this wasn't a game. Not to him. She glanced down at her bag. The small keychain she had taken from the store earlier was tucked inside. It wasn't worth much, but it didn't matter. The fact that she had taken it even as a joke was enough to make her feel uneasy. What if the guard thought she was trying to steal something more valuable? What if this turned into something bigger than just a misunderstanding? "I'm sorry," Jenna muttered, trying to keep her voice steady. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just thought it would be funny." Officer Daniels didn't respond immediately. He simply stood there waiting for her to open her bag. Jenna knew there was no point in trying to talk her way out of it. She had to show him the truth. With a sigh, she reluctantly reached for the zipper of her bag and pulled it open. Her fingers fumbled with the bag's contents as her heart pounded in her chest. The moment felt so heavy, like everything was riding on what happened next. Lisa stood silently by her side, still in shock, but she didn't say anything. She just watched, her eyes wide with concern. Jenna could feel the weight of Lisa's gaze, but more than that, she could feel the weight of the eyes around her, the eyes of the strangers who had stopped to watch. "Here," Jenna said, pulling the keychain out of her bag and holding it up to show the guard. "It's just a joke. I didn't mean anything by it." The guard looked at the keychain for a moment. It was a small, shiny object, nothing more than a trinket from the store. There was no way it could have been worth anything close to what people might steal from a mall. But the fact that Jenna had taken it, even as part of a prank, meant something. Officer Daniels took the keychain from her hand, examining it carefully. "I see," he said quietly. He wasn't angry, but there was no humor in his voice either. "A joke, huh?" Jenna nodded, feeling both relieved and embarrassed. This wasn't how she had imagined it. She had thought the whole situation would end with a friendly laugh, but instead she found herself facing a security guard who took his job seriously. She had underestimated him, and now she was paying the price. "Miss," the guard continued, "it's not funny when people think they can break the rules, even as a joke. You might not have meant any harm, but people come here to shop and enjoy themselves. If everyone thought it was okay to take things and laugh it off, this place would be chaos." Jenna felt a pang of guilt. She had always prided herself on being lighthearted and fun-loving. But now, standing in front of Officer Daniels, she realized that her joke had consequences. What if someone else had taken something more valuable? What if it had been a real theft? The guard's words made her think about the bigger picture, something she hadn't considered before. "I understand," Jenna said softly, looking down at her feet. She wanted to make it clear that she wasn't a troublemaker, that she wasn't the kind of person who broke the rules or took things that didn't belong to her. She just wanted to laugh a little, and now, the joke had backfired in a way she hadn't expected. For a few moments, the guard didn't say anything else. He just stood there holding the keychain in his hand, his face unreadable. Jenna waited, holding her breath. She wasn't sure what was going to happen next. Would he call the police? Would she be banned from the mall? The uncertainty was almost worse than the embarrassment. Finally, the guard spoke again, his tone much softer than before. "Look, I'm not going to call anyone, and I'm not going to make this a bigger issue. But you need to know that messing with security isn't something we take lightly. I'm letting you go with a warning. Just be more careful next time, okay?" Jenna nodded quickly, her heart still racing. "Thank you," she said, grateful that he wasn't going to take the situation further. She had learned her lesson. This had stopped being a joke the moment the guard walked toward her. The guard handed her back the keychain. "Consider it a lesson learned," he said, his voice still serious but not unkind. "Now I'd suggest you get back to shopping, but if you ever decide to mess with security again, it won't be so easy." Jenna could barely manage a smile as she took the keychain back. She wasn't laughing anymore, but she was thankful the whole ordeal was over. As Officer Daniels walked away, Jenna turned to Lisa. "Well, that definitely wasn't how I thought it would go." Lisa gave her a look that said it all. "I think you've learned your lesson, huh?" Jenna nodded, still feeling the weight of what had just happened. This time she wasn't so sure if pranks were as funny as they seemed. As Jenna walked away from Officer Daniels, she could feel her heart still pounding in her chest. She hadn't expected the situation to turn out like this. What she had thought would be a simple, funny prank had turned into something much more serious. She glanced at Lisa, who was still quiet beside her, clearly processing what had just happened. Lisa gave Jenna a look that was hard to interpret, partly relieved, partly amused, but also a bit concerned. "Well, that was unexpected," Lisa finally said, breaking the silence. "I can't believe you actually thought you could get away with that." Jenna managed a weak smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She felt embarrassed, even though she was trying to act like everything was fine. "Yeah, I thought it would just be a harmless joke, but that guy didn't even crack a smile. He was so serious." Lisa shook her head in disbelief. "He was way too serious. I mean, I get that he's a guard, but it was just a joke. I didn't think he'd react like that. Jenna sighed deeply. She could feel the weight of the whole situation. What had seemed like a funny prank at first now felt like a mistake. She had always prided herself on being the fun one, the person who could make people laugh and brighten up their day. But now, it seemed like her attempt at humor had just caused a whole mess. She could still feel the guard's eyes on her, as if he were judging her for every move she made. Officer Daniels had been calm and professional, but there was no mistaking the seriousness in his voice. He wasn't there to laugh at her joke or let her off easy. He had a job to do, and Jenna had crossed a line even if she hadn't meant to. It wasn't just about the prank anymore. It was about respect, boundaries, and the understanding that not everyone shared her sense of humor. Jenna had underestimated the situation, and now she was paying the price. I guess I learned my lesson, she muttered to herself, more to calm her nerves than to say anything to Lisa. I didn't think it'd go this far. Lisa, who had been quiet for a moment, finally spoke up. You know, I don't think you did anything that bad, but you definitely took it too far. The guard just didn't find it funny. Maybe next time pick a less risky prank. Jenna nodded in agreement. The last thing she wanted was to cause trouble. She had only wanted to make people laugh, not draw unwanted attention. But the fact that she had taken something from the store, even if it was small and not worth much, had made the situation more serious than it needed to be. They continued walking through the mall, passing by the same store where Jenna had grabbed the keychain. Her eyes flicked toward the window, and she couldn't help but feel guilty for even touching something that wasn't hers. The guilt gnawed at her. She hadn't stolen anything big, but she had still crossed a line, and now she was reflecting on the impact of her actions. Do you think he was going to call the police? Jenna asked, her voice a little softer than usual. She glanced back at Officer Daniels, who was still standing by the entrance, watching the flow of people. Lisa shrugged, her face thoughtful. I don't think so. He seemed like he was giving you a chance to just learn from it, but yeah, if you'd pushed it any further, he could have. I mean, he was serious, but he didn't make it worse than it had to be. Jenna let out a long breath of relief. She hadn't been arrested or banned from the mall, and there hadn't been any major consequences. At least, not yet. But she could already feel a shift in her perspective. What had seemed like a harmless prank now felt childish and irresponsible. The mall wasn't a playground, and Officer Daniels wasn't some clown to joke with. He was a professional doing his job, and she had disrespected that. The rest of the day was a blur. Jenna tried to shake off the feeling that had settled over her, but it lingered. Every time she passed another security guard or even glanced at the stores, she felt like she was being watched. She tried to focus on shopping, but the events from earlier kept replaying in her mind. The laughter from earlier in the day felt distant now, like a memory from another life. Lisa seemed to pick up on Jenna's mood. After a while, she asked, "You okay? You've been quiet for a while." Jenna looked up at her friend and forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm just thinking." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Thinking about what?" "About everything," Jenna admitted. "The prank, the guard, the way I acted. I guess I didn't realize how much it could backfire. I mean, I've done pranks before, but this time I really messed up." Lisa nodded, her expression softening. "I get it. You didn't mean any harm, but sometimes things just don't turn out the way we expect, you know? The guard was just doing his job. You didn't think it through, and that's okay. It happens to everyone." Jenna appreciated her friend's understanding. She was right. It wasn't the end of the world, but it was a reminder to be more mindful of the situations she put herself in. It was one thing to have fun and joke around, but it was another thing entirely to risk crossing boundaries, especially with someone like Officer Daniels, who wasn't there for fun and games. By the time they reached the food court, Jenna's mood had improved slightly, but the lesson had been firmly planted in her mind. She realized that this was one of those moments in life when you couldn't just laugh it off and move on. Sometimes actions had consequences, and those consequences could come much quicker than you expected. As they sat down to eat, Jenna looked around the food court and noticed how different everything seemed now. The bright lights, the busy people, the sounds of chatter and laughter. It all felt the same, but to her it was different. She had learned a lesson the hard way. She could still have fun, but she had to be careful about how far she pushed things. Not everything was a joke, and some people weren't there to play along. "Next time I want to pull a prank, remind me not to mess with security," Jenna said, laughing softly as she reached for her drink. Lisa chuckled. "I think that's a lesson you won't forget anytime soon." Jenna smiled, feeling a little lighter now. "Yeah, I guess so." And as they ate, the day slowly started to feel normal again. But Jenna knew she wouldn't forget the lesson she had learned. It wasn't just about being careful next time. It was about respecting people, understanding the limits of humor, and realizing that sometimes even the smallest actions can lead to unexpected consequences. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Jenna. She tried her best to push the awkward encounter with Officer Daniels to the back of her mind, but it was hard. Every time she walked past a security guard, or even when she heard someone laughing nearby, she couldn't help but remember the serious look on his face. The whole situation had left a mark on her, and it wasn't just about the prank anymore. It was about the feeling of being caught off guard, of realizing that what she thought would be funny had turned out to be anything but. As she and Lisa walked out of the mall later that afternoon, Jenna felt the weight of the day settle in. The mall was just as busy as it had been when they arrived, but now everything felt different to her. The bustling crowds, the bright stores, and the busy food court. They all seemed like reminders of how her harmless joke had turned into something much bigger. She kept glancing around, almost expecting to see Officer Daniels again, standing with his arms crossed, watching her every move. When they reached the parking lot, Lisa looked over at Jenna. "So, what now? You still want to prank people?" Jenna smiled sheepishly, still feeling a little embarrassed. "I think I've learned my lesson. No more messing with security guards." Lisa chuckled. "That's probably a good idea. Seriously, though, I get that you were just having fun. But next time, maybe think it through a little more." Jenna nodded, grateful for her friend's understanding. "Yeah, I'll definitely be more careful. I mean, I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I thought it was just a harmless joke." "I know you did," Lisa said, her tone light. "But some people just don't see things the same way. I mean, that guard was serious about his job. It's not like he was going to laugh it off." Jenna sighed as she got into the car. She knew Lisa was right. She had underestimated the seriousness of the situation. But there was something else that had started to nag at her. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that the guard wasn't just doing his job. He had also taught her something important that she hadn't fully appreciated before. What was it? She couldn't quite put her finger on it at first, but then it hit her. The guard hadn't just been serious because he was doing his job. He had treated her with respect, even when she made a mistake. Jenna could see it now. He hadn't embarrassed her, hadn't raised his voice or made a scene. He had been firm, but he had also given her the chance to make things right. That was something she hadn't expected from someone in that role. It made her realize how much she had taken for granted the simple idea of respecting authority and rules, even when it wasn't easy or convenient. The more Jenna thought about it, the more she respected Officer Daniels for the way he handled the situation. He hadn't overreacted, and he hadn't made her feel like a criminal. Instead, he had made it clear that there were boundaries, but he had also given her a chance to learn from her mistake. In a way, she felt lucky that it hadn't turned into something worse. It could have been a lot more serious. The guard could have involved the police, or even had her banned from the mall. But instead, he had let her go with a warning, a chance to make things right without further consequences. "I think that guard was trying to teach me something," Jenna said softly, as if the thought had only just fully clicked into place. Lisa looked over at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he wasn't just doing his job. He was treating me with respect. He could have been mean, could have embarrassed me or called the police, but he didn't. He just told me the rules and gave me a chance to learn from it. I don't know. I guess I didn't expect that." Lisa was quiet for a moment, considering what Jenna had said. Finally, she nodded. "Yeah, he was kind of a professional about it. He could have made a big deal out of it, but he didn't. I think he wanted you to understand, not just punish you." Jenna smiled to herself, feeling a sense of appreciation for Officer Daniels. It wasn't just that he hadn't treated her like a troublemaker. It was that he had given her the space to recognize her mistake and grow from it. She hadn't expected a lesson in humility to come from a mall security guard, but that's exactly what had happened. The rest of their drive home was quiet, but Jenna's mind was spinning with thoughts. She didn't think she would ever prank anyone in quite the same way again. This experience had made her realize that actions, even small ones, had consequences. And while humor was important, there were moments when it was best to know when to stop. She had learned the hard way that what seemed harmless to one person could be taken very differently by another. The next day, as she sat down to think about the events of the past few days, Jenna found herself reflecting on her approach to life. She had always loved making people laugh, pulling pranks, and creating fun moments, but now she was starting to see the importance of balance. It wasn't about being serious all the time. It was about understanding the boundaries, respecting others, and knowing when a joke might go too far. She picked up her phone and began scrolling through her social media feed, laughing at a few funny posts. But then she paused, looking at one post that caught her eye. It was a picture of a group of friends laughing together, a simple snapshot of joy. The caption read, "Laughter is the best medicine, but only if it's shared with respect." Jenna smiled to herself. It was as if the universe was sending her a sign. She realized that her pranks and jokes could still be part of who she was, but they had to be done with care. She didn't want to hurt anyone or cross any lines. She wanted to be the person who made people smile, not the person who made others uncomfortable. Later that week, Jenna went back to the mall with Lisa, but this time, she was more aware of her surroundings. She passed by Officer Daniels again, and this time, instead of feeling nervous, she gave him a polite nod. He gave her a small nod back, his face as serious as ever, but Jenna knew that she had learned something valuable from him. As they walked through the mall, Jenna's phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. She read it. "So, no pranking today?" Jenna replied, smiling. "Not unless it's a harmless joke. Just good vibes and good company today." And with that, she realized that sometimes the best way to have fun wasn't by pushing boundaries, but by respecting them. The lesson had been hard to learn, but it had stuck with her, and she was a little wiser for it. A few days passed after the incident with Officer Daniels, and Jenna found herself in a very different state of mind than she had been before. It was as though the encounter had given her a new perspective on things. She had always prided herself on being fun-loving, always ready with a joke or a prank, but now there was a deeper understanding of what humor and boundaries meant. The day after her run-in with the guard, Jenna went to meet Lisa for coffee. As soon as she sat down, Lisa raised an eyebrow, clearly waiting for her friend to speak up about what had happened. Jenna hadn't told her the whole story yet, and she could tell that Lisa was dying to know how she was feeling after the whole ordeal. "So, how are you holding up after your, little adventure with security?" Lisa asked with a smile, teasing but also genuinely curious. Jenna chuckled, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "You know, it's kind of strange. I keep thinking about it, but not in the way I thought I would. At first I was embarrassed, like really embarrassed, but now I feel like I learned something." Lisa's smile softened. "I figured as much. You've been quiet lately, like you're processing all of it. What did you learn?" Jenna took a sip of her coffee, thinking carefully before answering. "I think I learned about respect, and not just for other people, but for rules and boundaries too. I've always made jokes and pranks a part of who I am, and I didn't realize that sometimes those things can go too far." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, that makes sense. I think you were so used to making people laugh that you didn't always think about how your pranks might affect someone else. But you're not the type of person who wants to hurt anyone, right?" Jenna smiled softly. "Exactly. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to have fun. But I've been thinking about what happened with Officer Daniels. He didn't have to be so patient with me, you know? He didn't embarrass me or make a big scene. He just let me learn from it. I think he saw that I wasn't trying to cause trouble, but he still held me accountable." "That's true," Lisa agreed. "He could have been way harder on you, but instead he just gave you a chance to realize where you went wrong. I think that's what made it stick with you. Jenna nodded, her mind still reflecting on that moment with the guard. She'd expected him to get angry or make her feel like a criminal, but instead he had been calm and respectful, like he understood that people make mistakes. It was almost like he had taught her the lesson not through punishment, but through understanding. "I guess I needed to see it from his point of view," Jenna said. "He wasn't there to entertain me or play along with my joke. He was there to do his job, and I think that's something I've missed before. I used to think that rules were boring or unnecessary, but now I see how they actually keep things in order. They're there to help, not to ruin the fun." Lisa smiled warmly at her friend. "I think that's a big step for you. You're learning to balance having fun with being responsible, and that's a really important lesson." Jenna leaned back in her chair, feeling a sense of calm settle over her. She had made a mistake, but it wasn't the end of the world. What mattered most was how she responded to it. Instead of letting the embarrassment control her, she was choosing to learn from it, to grow. And that felt good. After they finished their coffee, Jenna and Lisa decided to head to the park for a walk. As they strolled along the path, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. They joked about their latest shopping adventures, talked about funny memes they had seen online, and shared stories from their childhood. But even in the middle of all the laughter, Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that she was now seeing things with new eyes. The world hadn't changed, but her perspective on it had. As they reached a bench near the lake, Lisa turned to Jenna and said, "You know, you've always been a positive person. You bring joy to everyone around you. It's just about knowing where to draw the line, right?" Jenna smiled. "Yeah, I think you're right. I've always wanted to make people laugh, but now I get that it's important to understand the situation. Some people might not find the same things funny, and that's okay. It's about respecting others and being aware of what they might feel." Lisa laughed lightly. "And maybe no more pranks on security guards." Jenna grinned. "Definitely no more pranks on security guards. That's off the list for good." As they sat there enjoying the peaceful view of the lake, Jenna felt a sense of relief. The weight of the awkward encounter with Officer Daniels had finally lifted. She had learned something valuable, and even though it had been a tough lesson, she was glad she had gone through it. She had always been the type of person who loved making people laugh, but now she realized that true humor wasn't just about a clever joke or a quick prank. It was about connection, about bringing joy in a way that made everyone feel comfortable, not awkward or uncomfortable. Later that evening, as Jenna was getting ready to head to bed, her phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. "Don't forget, next weekend we're going to that new comedy show. Let's just stick to the fun stuff this time, okay?" Jenna smiled to herself, her heart feeling lighter than it had in days. She quickly typed her reply. "Sounds perfect. No pranks, just good laughs. Can't wait." And with that, Jenna finally felt like she was moving past the event at the mall. She had taken something that could have been a negative experience and turned it into a positive one. She had learned to respect boundaries and understood that humor could still be part of her life, as long as she approached it with awareness. It wasn't about stopping who she was, but about becoming more mindful of the people around her and the consequences of her actions. The lesson she had learned would stay with her, guiding her in future decisions. Jenna was ready to embrace her fun-loving nature, but now, it was tempered with a new sense of respect and responsibility. The next day, Jenna passed by the mall again, this time without the nervousness she had felt before. She didn't even glance at the security guard stationed by the entrance. She walked past him with a calm, collected stride, a small smile on her face. She had learned what she needed to, and she was stronger for it, and from then on, whenever she thought about pranks or jokes, she would remember Officer Daniels, and how he had taught her that the best kind of fun didn't come at the expense of someone else's comfort or respect.